Hey everybody, I'm Rosalyn Dennett, and welcome to Season 4 of Refocus. Each episode, I'm joined by incredible guests from all areas of the music industry for real and informative conversations with a focus on folk. Hello and welcome to Refocus. Our guest today is Beth Cavanagh. Beth Cavanagh is a seasoned music publicist and founder of What's the Story, a boutique publicity company launched in 2017 to champion new talent, reconnect established artists with the evolving media landscape, and, above all, for the love of music. Her client roster has included acclaimed artists such as Aysanabee, Caveboy, Celeigh Cardinal, Cowboy Junkies, Good Lovely, Joel Plaskett, Leela Gilday, Mimi Obonsoan, Prozzäk, Slean, and Skydiggers, as well as events like the Muskoka Music Festival. Her campaigns have secured placements on CBC's Q, the Toronto Star, Exclaim, and national TV, cementing her reputation as a trusted voice in Canadian music PR. Beth is also a dedicated advocate for professional development in the music industry. She has shared her expertise as a speaker and panelist at events including Folk Alliance International, Breakout West, Folk Music Ontario, Nova Scotia Music Week, and NOMFA. She is currently a board member of the Mariposa Folk Foundation and has served as a mentor for emerging professionals through organizations like Manitoba Music, Metalworks Institute, and as a FACTOR Juror. Always at the forefront of Canada's evolving music scene, Beth brings warmth, strategy, and a deep industry knowledge to every artist's story she helps tell. Beth, how are you doing? Nice to see you.
I'm good. Nice to see you.
So, first of all, I loved reading your roster list there. Some of those artist examples, many friends of the show are on that list. I feel like see each other pretty often. You're out and about in the music scene at various events. How has this year been going for you?
It's been good. It's flown by. I can't believe how quickly the first few months of the year have been, but it's been exciting. Our industry is constantly evolving, and I think it's, taking time to sit back and reevaluate our roles and what we can offer to clients, to our industry, to our friends, and our community. So it's been a really fun, exciting, unexpected year. Everything from Celeigh Cardinal getting some exciting Juno nominations, her performing the In Memoriam at the Gala Award show was, I still get shivers thinking about it because I just think the song is so beautiful, and it was perfect for that moment. So yeah, lots of things happening and lots still to come this year. So
fabulous. I've been really excited to talk to you because we actually haven't had a publicist on the program yet. We've talked to a lot of different folks working in different parts of the music industry, and I've been really looking forward to having this conversation because it's such an important part of the music ecosystem and something that I think artists are curious about. I wanted to start off this conversation with just a bit of an overview of what a publicist does, what publicity means, and maybe some of the changes that have occurred over the last, kind of decade and what that means as our media landscape has been changing.
Yeah, what I find is very unique. I think a lot of publicists, we all have, I'm sure, and I'm only speaking for myself, and I work independently, and I have now with my company for 8 years. I did have a great chance of working at another company, two other companies before I launched my company. So I had really great mentors and folks that helped me build my career because I never planned to be a publicist ever. I have a degree in music and started in the music side of things, and, really dreamed about being a music supervisor when I was in my early days and started in publishing. So to kind of fall into publicity has been very interesting, but it's been very exciting too. I think that the last 10 years, I think one of the important things is keeping up to date on the changes. And for me, I love following other publicists. I love to see what they're doing. And I get really excited when I see something really unique and cool happening, and it inspires me always. And I say the same thing for artists when they're kind of hitting a roadblock in their creativity, if they're social media, if they're tired. And I was like, follow a couple of artists that you really love as musicians and love maybe as humans, and know them personally or don't know them, to help kind of get yourself a bit inspired. We know how important community is. how important relationships are in our industry. I try to go out to as many shows as possible still. I go to as many conferences. There was a time where we did a lot of emailing, and I feel like some people now are starting to pick up the phone again.
Mhm.
Because we're finding 20 emails could be a 5-minute conversation. So yeah, I think that it's really understanding the goals. Like with my clients, I have them fill out this document, and one of it is like, what are your goals with the project? Not just press goals, like overall goals with the project. And I look at those goals and let's figure out how we can reach them, whether it takes a year, whether it's a 6-month goal, a 3-month goal. What are some of the things we need to do to reach those goals? And I think that it's just constantly kind of almost re-educating yourself on a daily basis. Like I'm always learning every day. I'm thankful for that. I like that I still want to learn. I think that it's really important to me to be understanding what are the new opportunities. Where does this client maybe fit in that opportunity? Where does this client fit in this opportunity? Because reaching out to a huge outlet with a new artist, a new voice that nobody knows yet, they're still building their story. It's fine for me like to put that artist on their radar because I have belief in them building that team and going to be, in quotes, blowing up or going to be a voice that you need to hear. But I'm not going to be like, hey, do you want to interview them? But, they're still brand new. I want you to listen to them and know their name. Because in 5 years from now, you might be like, Beth, I remember when you introduced me to that artist.
And even before we get into, the pitching and the strategy around targeting different media outlets, I wanted to focus even just on the name of your company, What's the Story, and the way that you interact with your clients and with artists is so focused on telling the artist's story and the story of what the release is or what the message is that you're putting out there. So you mentioned that you have this artist intake form to try and gather some information that way. How do you work with artists to help them develop their story? Or how can people look inward to try to find what their own story is?
I will say one key thing I find that's been so valuable, and I am not a bio writer by no means. I'm happy to work with a bio and help shape it and craft it, but that is not personally my forte. Some publicists are amazing at them, but I have a lot of really great bio writers that I do recommend artists talk to because I think the bio these days is so valuable. Unfortunately, because media outlets are short staffed or have less opportunities to do a full form interview. So there is a lot of people pulling from a bio. And so having that bio is of value. So I find that the artist will have those conversations with the bio writer, and sometimes that helps them craft part of their story. Part of my, my intake form is asking all those questions too, like asking them about specific songs. Every project is so unique, Rosalyn, like every single one. And I found my company name came out of me being in enough meetings in my early days of asking people what their story was. And some artists, they don't know yet. Some artists are still creating their story because they're very young and they're right out of college or university. They haven't even experienced enough yet. And then other artists don't realize necessarily that part of their stories are so unique, and they don't think that way necessarily. That element of their life is really unique. So it's talking to them about their upbringing, where did they go to school, who were they influenced by growing up, sometimes even their relationships with their family, like all those kinds of unique things that make everyone an individual, because nobody has the same family. Nobody has. So it's finding all those little bites, but also understanding that not everyone wants to share all their story. And I'm very mindful of that I want to make sure an artist feels fully comfortable and confident in talking about their story. Because if they don't, it's really hard, it's you can't go back to the media, it's important for them to be fully confident and comfortable and excited to talk about the album, having them do a track by track so they remember why they wrote every song and what influenced each song on the album helps them also craft their story. And they're like, oh yeah, that one was really cool. I forgot I was backpacking through Italy and this song came to be in a low state where I was just wanted to write something. And some people are dealing with loss and they might not be ready, and some people want their fans to interpret the songs themselves. And I don't think there's any right or wrong way. I think it's just understanding, because I'm the person that's going to be, reaching out to the outlet with that story. I want to make sure that if somebody is interested in talking to you, or if you're ready to talk about it too.
Yeah. So don't put in your bio something like Rosalyn grew up around kitchen parties if you don't want somebody, when they're interviewing you, to say, so tell us about the kitchen parties you grew up going to,
Yeah.
Thinking about bios, and I feel like it's kind of like a lost art of the bio sometimes, and especially with like ChatGPT and all the shortcuts that people can take in bio writing. Are there tips that you have around how to present yourself? And we can go into as much detail, like, I mean, I'm looking at like how many formats should you have of your bio? Should you have different versions of it to present to people? What should people be considering when writing that?
For me, I find there's great value in having the album bio. And it doesn't necessarily get shared right away. Pieces of it can be shared through the campaign leading, especially because everyone's rollout plans are so different. And some people wait a few singles before they even announce the album bio. And that's where I think the artist bio has value. And I've had it where I have an album bio, and then at the bottom, I'll have the artist focus bio. And again, that's like where the accolades go. If you've been around for 20 years, you're likely going to have some nominations, some wins, some songs that were synced in a couple of TV shows, just all the stuff that like is part of your career. And I think in most cases, a lot of it you're really proud of and excited to share. And you kind of look back on it. Even when I look back on my own bio, I'm like, oh yeah, I've done some cool stuff, but you don't realize it sometimes when you're in it. So I think that there's so many good blogs online about bios, about the best bios. If you have an agent, they're going to have a bio that they want. Applying to festivals, they're going to have specific style of bios they're requesting, especially length. They're not looking for 1,000-word bio. They want something tight. And that's where, depending on what you're using it for, you can have like 3 or 4 different kinds of bios, and they're all going to be used in different ways.
And then when you were talking about the album bio, you mean like, and you're talking about going track by track and really like explaining each song. It almost like reminds me of like, that's what we used to have liner notes for. That used to be so mysterious. Yeah.
I will say with the album bio, I actually personally prefer to only have a couple of songs mentioned, because for me, I look at a bio and I want somebody to read it and go, ooh, I want to know more. That is so cool. Let's find out more. Because if you lay everything out in the bio, then the last thing I want is somebody to read and go, okay, well, I know everything about this person. Of course, lots can get shared in interviews depending on how in-depth an interview is. But yeah, I really strongly believe that a strong bio, read other artists' bios. If you love a bio of an artist, find out who did it,
Yeah.
Because there are like some incredible bio writers in Canada. I also see, certain artists will do their own bio. I've got a couple of projects that artists are doing their own, and it's from their voice. And then I've seen other artists who are working with other artists who are fans of theirs to write their bio.
Oh, neat.
Yeah. So it's, personally, I'm like, I think anything goes. I think if you're proud of something and it shows, then you'll be confident in how you're presenting said bio, whether it be your voice, whether it be your best friend's voice who's a fan, or hiring a professional bio writer.
So now I want to talk a bit about media outlets and who's out there to be pitched to. I feel like the landscape in the last 20 years has changed pretty dramatically in terms of just like the amount of media outlets that are available, the amount of like independent media outlets that are out there like covering independent artists. What's it like for you, and who are you approaching when you're working with a client? Let's say we'll focus like in the folk realm, because that's what our focus is on Refocus. So
I'm not going to lie to you. I love the folk Americano world too, because I actually do feel that there is still some great outlets, and not just in Canada, but internationally, that are covering folk Americana. And for me, sometimes I look at a project and I see, okay, they're going to release a couple of singles and then the album. So sometimes if it's a newer voice, it makes more sense to like pitch an outlet, possibly like Americana UK, to see if they would do a track premiere or a video premiere. They have really amazing humans over there that do such thoughtful premieres, thoughtful reviews. I get so many amazing pull quotes from them that I think for artists, like some pull quotes you might use for your whole career because it is just so perfect highlighting you as an artist, as a band. So yeah, so I think that for certain artists, looking at a potential premiere, even like a radio premiere, like with CKUA or with, because there are so many great folk radio, Americana roots shows across this country alone, looking at, giving them broadcast premiere the day before the single drops. Because when you're not dealing with necessarily a label or having to focus on perhaps the DSPs, you have a bit of freedom, to kind of have fun. And not saying you can't have fun with a label and stuff, but you have a bit of freedom to kind of do whatever you want. And I like artists to like have these conversations and have fun. And let's do whatever you want. Let's figure out a unique way of releasing. Like if you want to release 6 songs before your album drops, let's figure out different ways of how we can talk to different outlets about each song. And because going back to the same person constantly doesn't necessarily do you any favors. Like sometimes it does take a couple songs, but sometimes it's because you've been building your story along the way. I've had artists get huge syncs and I'll go back to media, be like, oh, this artist just got a big sync. And then all of a sudden they're like, okay, so, or they get like multitude of spins. People do still ask, they want some number stuff, but I like to lean into a little bit more unique things. I understand that is a thing for some folks, but I think there's other way of kind of showing the excitement and growth of an artist without just concentrating on their numbers and stuff.
And we see numbers, you mean like metrics, like they got this many streams or have this many followers, that sort of thing?
Yeah, I think that's a whole other podcast.
Really? And then just to clarify too, like when we're talking about publicity, just like what would be the difference between either utilizing a publicist or doing your own kind of reach out to media versus like posting on your Instagram or doing, like your regular kind of social media activities? What's the difference between those two? And who are you specifically targeting when what are we talking about when we're talking about publicity?
I really think that artists need to know their hometown. They should know all the media outlets in their community and their hometown. There are artists I've worked with where they literally can just text the media outlet in their home community because they have spent years pitching them themselves. And I think there's so much value in you understanding your community and being supported by your community. Hiring a publicist when the buzz is happening and you're too busy focusing on other things to handle the requests that are coming in, or you're looking to kind of obviously branch out outside of your community. And depending on where you might fit in the landscape, like, because you're hiring us because of our relationships and our connections, we spend, for me, like I've spent years building relationships with media outlets who learn to trust you. They trust your publicist. And yes, trust me, I've had artists who've had great luck emailing somebody themselves because some people do respond to an artist interaction. Some artists will just DM another outlet on Instagram. And it works sometimes, but it could be just that quick moment. And then they're like, oh yeah, Beth's been reaching out to me about you, like just like different things. Like there's so many different unique ways of approaching it. But I think, I don't know, I just feel that there's so much value when the time is right to hire a publicist. And sometimes you'll have that conversation with a bunch of publicists while you're figuring out if the time is right. And everyone may tell you something different. And I'm very candid with people if I think there's still things that they could be doing on their own. And I think, I'll tell them, I think it would make more sense for you to spend your money on these components. Because, oh my gosh, like we know how hard it is right now financially in our industry. So I'm so mindful of that because I want to deliver a really strong and solid campaign. And I can't guarantee results. Like that's a very unique thing about being a publicist is that it's unfortunately, I can look at a project and just see all the pieces and all the components and how it's going to how I hope it will work. But I have to spend a lot of my time maintaining expectations and having those conversations about the wins and about the not so big wins that sometimes we might have. So, and unfortunately, Rosalyn, I know you know this, but Meta has also made it really challenging for artists even to share their media on certain platforms. So that's the other really hard thing now, is supporting the media outlets that are supporting you, because you want to be thankful that so-and-so did an album review, but then all of a sudden you've got to take a screen grab and share it, and you can't link to the article.
Yes.
So it's a very unique time for sharing. And, I think Linktree, for a lot of artists, that's a great tool to use to put your media pieces, your press pieces, your press hits in, whether it be print, online, radio, like what have you. So, yeah.
And when you're talking about artists building connections in their local community and how that's a good place to start, what are some tips that you would have for people on how to start building those relationships?
Keeping it simple, like any email that if you're introducing yourself to, your local campus, like let's use a campus community station, doing your research, like going on their website and seeing who writes about the local musicians, seeing who's doing interviews, if you're pitching somebody that only plays new singles and they don't do any interviews, then you want to approach them, write to that host. And a lot of stations, like especially the community and campus, a lot of them have really great websites, and you can go and look at the schedule and see who the host is and look at the playlist. And then you're like, oh yeah, I'm very similar to those 4 artists. I think this song will suit their program. So starting out even just like that and reaching out to that host and introducing, a really short little introduction to who you are, a link to the song. Do not do any attachments ever. They are what gets flagged as spam. There are so many incredible tools now that artists have, from Bandcamp to SoundCloud to Disco, just great ways for you to embed stuff into an email. Building an EPK on your website using Bandzoogle. Like Bandzoogle is great for building websites. Squarespace, so many different ways that you can build a password protected or just a back end page that has all the information that somebody would need. I really think that for your local community is watching the show, listening to the show, and understanding, like, does your local morning show have artists on the show to do performances? Do you have a show that's coming up that you are playing at a venue that they'll know, and a story that they want to share? Does it make sense for their demographic? Like looking at their socials, seeing what they're sharing. If there's an artist that's like a couple of years ahead of you in their career, then it's something just to be mindful of. Like you can even just say, hey, I'm so-and-so. I'm a big fan of this artist that just was on the show. Here's a live performance video. I think I'd be a great fit for this program. I have a show coming up at this venue, that kind of thing. It takes time. And there's so much patience in our industry, not just as a publicist, I think as artists, anyone, like everyone, we have to literally have so much patience to deal with the volume of stuff that's coming out. And our growth isn't overnight. Those overnight success stories, they don't exist. If you do the research of somebody that appears to be an overnight success story, you'll see that they've been doing it for 10 years.
Yeah, that's my takes 10 years to become an overnight success. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that, Instagram, I think your tools, from having media outlets cover you, but also building your fan base in a really natural way, one fan at a time, and seeing that slow growth. Because you might have somebody discover, CBC, I love CBC. And I've had countless artists tell me that people still come up to their merch table after a show to say, I heard your song on CBC and I came to your show. And I'm so thankful that I still hear that to this day. There are so many great hosts and interviewers across this country. So I'm always very thankful that, as a new artist, reaching out to your local Radio 1 show. Most markets have a morning show and an afternoon show, and finding a lot of them have great websites that will have an email address for that show. So you could send your song to that program. I think it is really just understanding what they're covering and why your story is unique and would be something that they should consider covering, or even just introducing yourself. You know, if you're still not quite there yet, maybe it is just getting a song spun. You're not ready for the interview, but you have a really great, strong song that has been well produced, well mixed, well mastered that you can present to them.
And then, outside of building those relationships in your local community, would you say it's like a similar strategy if, let's say, you're going on a tour and you're trying to break into a new market? That could be, I think, pretty intimidating if you're looking at like a cross Canada tour. How do you suggest like approaching that kind of tour promo and trying to see some ticket sales across the country or in a new market?
Yeah, this is definitely something that I have seen change so much in the past 5 years. It's just how media is able to cover artists coming to a community. And it varies. Every single city and town varies. Some towns and communities and cities are just thankful to have shows because they are a smaller market. So your chance of being covered can be a little bit easier. Others, they have to focus on community local connections. So, even in my intake form, I have a thing where they fill out the tour part and I want to know, did you go to university there? Do you have a grandparent that lives in that town? Do you have a relative? Did you go to summer camp in this city or town? Because all those little angles are so valuable and helpful for pitching. I'm working with Amanda Rayom on her recent tour, and her whole album is all these incredible Métis stories, but these beautiful local connections to these markets that she's been touring in. So it's been really helpful in the writer or interviewer, whatever media outlet, to see, okay, this is beautiful. These stories are highlighting stories of our community that we want to share with our readers, our listeners, our audience. So I think that if you are a new artist looking at touring, I really think looking at whether it be home roots, really kind of start grassroots. Look at other artists that are doing backyard concerts or home shows, like supporting those kinds of shows too. And you can I always tell artists, I'm like, go and look at another artist's website and see where they're touring. If it's somebody that makes sense, collaborations are key. I think that some artists, Aysanabee is a great example of somebody that his tour, he's been inviting local Indigenous artists to apply to be his openers across his whole Canadian tour, his first ever headlining tour. And between him helping elevate these voices, which has been so heartwarming and beautiful, to the excitement of these artists, they're so thrilled to be opening for him. And then obviously that's a local community connection that the media outlet is so excited to talk to that artist that now has this opportunity to open for a Juno award-winning artist. And, and then the other, I love the co-billing, or, if there's a couple of artists that, you've got to tour very strategically these days. It's very expensive. So maybe it is you and another artist that you love, that you've become friends with. Maybe you share a band, or maybe you have, local openers in every market, and there's a unique premise behind how you're choosing those local openers. There's so many fun ways to tour. I think I just think that there's like value in kind of trying out different things and being very intentional behind your ideas, but knowing that not everything's going to work,
I'm wondering, like, let's say that they're working with a publicist, and it almost seems like it's helpful to be talking to your publicist or thinking of like those kind of publicity angles as you're booking the tour or before you start booking the tour, to try and find ways to be telling the story through the tour, not just gigs,
I'm very thankful. I feel like artists are learning so well to reach out well in advance these days. I went into management for a few years too. And I think part of it was that I've always loved being a bit more of part of an overall picture of a project, not just the publicist. So I love where I can to give suggestions, whether the artist takes it or not. I just think it's so fun to like be part of an overall picture. I have tons of artists that I'm their team. I'm it. And we talk very in depth about rollout plans and about touring and about how to release the songs together. Like we communicate ideas together. And, I just love, like there was one artist I worked with where they wanted to release a whole bunch of songs. And I was like, well, let's try to build your fan base on different outlets. And maybe let's do one just on YouTube because it's a video, and we won't put it on the DSPs yet. We'll just, or on like Spotify, on those partners. Let's just do on YouTube. And so people, and YouTube's free. There's no barrier for anyone to watch it unless you don't have, decent Wi-Fi. But having people be able to just go and watch that video on YouTube. And that's the only way right now you can listen and hear this song, to, doing a song exclusively on Bandcamp Friday. Lots of different, there's just so many fun ways as an independent artist that you can roll out your campaign. I'm so thankful when I get brought in early enough to be part of that. I'm also I love when I get brought in and they've got the whole plan. They've got all their singles. They know what they want to do. And again, these things can change. If an artist has a publisher and gets a really great sync, then you might shift that to that song. Or they might get a really amazing support slot on a tour in Ontario or across the country. And that can change the whole plan. But yeah, I think that there's a lot of unique ways to tour. I think it's just being really strategic these days. I think that there's so much value in artists meeting other artists at something like FMO, at FAI, like at these conferences that, especially, I honestly will say, going to your conference, I think that artists have that chance because it's not as overwhelming as a really big one, for them to actually build real relationships. Those could be lasting relationships you have for years. And whether it be meeting another artist, meeting a publicist like myself, meeting an agent, meeting a festival booker, I think that going to these conferences, even if you're not showcasing, can be so much value for meeting people and learning so much about the industry.
You mentioned earlier about kind of measuring success, or managing at least expectations there. How do you suggest that people approach that when they are working with a publicist? Definitely, sometimes I say to folks, like, unless you've done it yourself, it's really hard to hire somebody to do the work. So unless you've worked on your own publicity as an artist, it's hard to manage your expectations if you haven't done the work before and you hire somebody and just expect them to wave a magic wand and now you're famous. How do you work with people to manage those expectations, and what does success look like in a campaign?
Oh yeah, because it's so different for every single artist. Initial consultation. That first call is actually where I do ask a lot of these questions too, before we get to an actual full project campaign, like publicity campaign. Because I think every artist has such different dreams and different ways of measuring their own success. Somebody getting a song to CBC Music Top 20, that could be their main goal. They just want to get a song on CBC Music Top 20, and that's their main goal. And then other goals are increasing their fan base or doing 5 shows. Like, some artists are very realistic in their 6-month, 1 year, 5 year, 3 year, 5 year plans. It's such a challenging question.
I imagine some of that also has to be taking stock of where you're at the beginning of that campaign, because sometimes that growth is so incremental,
Yeah.
right? That it's,
Yes.
you could blink and not really realize that actually you have gained followers, gained audiences,
Yes.
you've sold tickets, you've gotten
Yeah.
reviews, you've gotten radio plays, but, sometimes it's, it's not going to be like a flash and all of a sudden you're at that success point. It can be incremental.
And also, Rosalyn, like, you could get a lot of press and still have a challenge selling tickets. So I think that, and right now, there's a lot of factors about ticket sales and just the way that the touring world is changing and stuff. And, again, I've had artists do some huge press hits and not had it necessarily sell. It's not like they just sold 100 tickets because of that big media hit, because your fans are still, for me, and I will tell this to everyone, that your fans are the most important people in your career. And you need to literally be building them as they discover you, whether it be through seeing you on a morning show and hearing you perform a song or your conversation, or whether they discover you because you're featured on a track with another artist that they love, or whether they discover you because you are playing a free outdoor festival show and they're like, oh, I don't know this artist, but I'm going to go and follow them. And I do think that we're seeing a big change now too with artists. Not that it disappeared, but a lot of artists kind of stopped, I think, doing the newsletter and the newsletter's kind of having to come back.
Yeah.
Because there's too many social media outlets that you were getting overwhelmed. And so now that direct contact with your fans through the newsletter is so valuable. So at your merch table, having the QR code to sign up for their newsletter, having, if you want to do the old school piece of paper and they write there. But I do think that that is so valuable.
Yes. And I'll shout out and direct folks to, we did an amazing interview with the artist Chris Coole, who does one of my favorite artist newsletters of all time. And he does, I think this was back in our first season, but if you look in our show archives, you can find it and we'll link it in the notes as well, because he does a really wonderful deep dive into the art of the newsletter, and the multiple ways that you can give to your fans through those things. And you bring up such a beautiful point about the relationship with the fans. I think that's a great kind of closing sentiment to make, in that it's, these relationships are so precious. And ultimately, when we're talking about press publicity, it's the medium to find, the folks that you're going to be building those relationships with. But speaking of relationship building too, how can folks find What's the Story? How can people find out more about you online?
Yeah, I mean, if you go to my website, what'sthestory.ca, I have lots of information on there about me and my career and, who I've worked with, because I think it's really important to find a publicist that feels like a really good fit for you as an artist. Personally, I prefer email only because I'm not always right on my phone, but I do consultation calls once we have a couple of conversations. The music's very important to me. If I'm not connecting with the music, I will politely let an artist know. And sometimes if you don't hear back, it's just, there's a lot going on and I can't respond to every, I try my best to always get back to everyone if I can. But sometimes in that moment, I've just got, 15 interviews happening in a week and like a lot of different things going on. And I think that, every publicist works in their own different unique ways. And I've had a lot of people tell me in my career that, they'll tell their music friends to hire a publicist almost first because, an agent and a manager, those are different roles that you don't necessarily in quotes hire, but the publicist or radio tracker and stuff can be one of the first people you end up working with on your team as you build before you even get to a label and those kinds of different people. So yeah, there's so many incredible publicists across the country. And I'm so appreciative of their support and the community that we've built with each other. And I think that goes the same for artists. I think that there's a lot of incredible artists that have that community that they've built. And so that's where I love when somebody emails me and says, so-and-so recommended you. I'm always just it's just so nice. I just I never get tired of that.
Beth, thank you so much for coming on and chatting with us. It's been so great to connect with you, and thanks for sharing your expertise with us.
Thanks so much, Rosalyn.
That's all for this episode, friends. The Refocus podcast is an original production by Folk Canada. Find out more by heading to folkcanada.com/refocus. That's REFOLKUS. The podcast is produced by Kayla Nizon and Rosalyn Dennett and mixed by Jordan Moore at the Pod Cabin. The opening theme is written and performed by King Cardiac, and the artwork is by Jamie Karn. Please give us a download, subscribe, rate, and review to let us know you care, and follow us at folk_Canada on Instagram to submit your questions.